everybody to Remembering Hope and Bill. I was here not so very long ago welcoming many of you probably to the slide presentations that Bill did, that you saw him walking in with his slide projector. So as time goes by, things change. So I want to welcome you all here. And I just wanted to say a little bit about Bill. He touched the lives of everyone he met, from the people that walked into his store. He was a storyteller, and anyone who spent any time in Naples seems to know Bill Vierhile. As we learned of Bill's passing on that bitter day in January, stories began to emerge from the nooks and crannies of it seemed like everybody that I spoke with's memory. So many stories that I suspect most of us here have stories about Bill and or Hope, and it's our hope that you'll share them with us this evening. Both in honor of their love of Naples and our love of them. And I'd like to thank a few people, Bristol Valley Theater and the Naples Historical Society for hosting this event. Troy Cusson up there behind the camera, who is videotaping this as well as the slide presentations that Bill did for us. Arbor Hill Winery, who's been providing the wine. And most of all, Hope and Bill Vierhile, for decades of community building and being the keepers of Naples history for so very long. Thanks.
Thanks, Greta, and thank you all for being here today. It's a very special opportunity for all of us to sort of continue the legacy that Bill and Hope had in the community. They were very much community people, and I see a lot of our community out there today, and we hope that we can continue their legacy. As far as Bristol Valley Theater goes, Bill was a board member. Bill was a Board of Advisors person. By the time I came into the picture, he was a Board of Advisors, and also helped with so much. Helped with if we needed a refrigerator to keep the concessions cold, but helped if we needed a washing machine to watch the costumes, helped if we needed a connection of a place to stay. He always had ideas. He made a connection between us and St. Januarius Rectory, where we were able to house people for years, and he was instrumental in that happening. It would not have happened without his help. And one of my favorite things was to be able to introduce our props master every year, the person to Bill. If you need anything and you cannot find it, Bill will help you find that thing. And he worked with many young people who came through for a summer to work on our props, and was instrumental in making our tiny props budgets look great, because he knew how to find anything, and he was so generous and willing to share everything that he had. I'll start off. What we'd like to do today is share stories. So if you have a story about Bill or about Hope that you would like, or about both of them that you would like to share, we would love to hear it. You may not be comfortable either mounting these sort of crickety stairs or even being up in front of us. We do have a microphone which I can bring to you out there if you prefer to stay at your seat, but we do hope that all of you will take a moment to share a memory or two of Bill's. And to get I have a few that were sent to us, as does Greta, that were sent to us by people that can't be here tonight. But just if you'd like to, come on up, feel free. If you'd rather stay where you are, raise your hand and we'll come to you. But I'm going to start with my story. I moved to Naples 13 years ago. I didn't know anyone except for the people that had hired me to work at Bristol Valley Theater, and I had come up a week or two early to find a place to live, and had rented 164 South Main Street, top floor, which was one of Bill's properties at the time. I chose it because it was a fabulous apartment. It's still one of my favorite apartments I've ever lived in. I loved the layout of it. It had the most fabulous kitchen with all the old 1950s accoutrement. Not the appliances so much, but the Rachel has them too. We were just talking about the other day. The cabinets. That sliding cabinets and glassware cabinet was just beautiful. And it had a window looking out on the woods where when I did my dishes, I could look out, and what could be better than that? I mean, if you have to do dishes, you want a great view. So that's why I chose that apartment, and I still have very, very fond memories of living there. Bill was a great landlord. I sometimes felt guilty. He was such a great landlord, plowing my driveway and mowing my lawn and all those kinds of things that a landlord should do, but he went above and beyond to do. But my favorite part, the day that I moved in, it was a day. I had driven from Manhattan where I lived for 20 years before I came here. I had not had a driver's license. I got a driver's license specifically to come back, to leave Manhattan to go to Naples. So I had driven, the last time I had driven over 3 hours at a stretch was when I was about 18 years old. And I was far from 18. I know you will find it hard when I came to Naples for the first time. So I had driven a rental car, white-knuckled all the way, with everything I owned in the back seat, except for everything that was in the truck, driven by two very nice Polish gentlemen that were driving most of my belongings. And I had my 2 cats who screamed the entire way. The only thing that could silence them was if I sang to them, so I sang the entire way. As soon as I got onto the New Jersey Turnpike, I was sideswiped by a car, and they knocked the mirror off of the rental car, and I pulled over so that I could report the accident. And they, of course, it's the New Jersey Turnpike. Nobody stopped. So I just kept going. I was supposed to be in Naples much earlier. All of my belongings arrived in Naples much earlier. I probably got into Naples at about 11 p.m. And my 2 Polish living men, who had to wait until I got here before they could go back to Manhattan, had waited at 164 South Main Street for a while. And I didn't come, and I wouldn't answer my cell phone because I couldn't drive and talk on the cell phone because I was terrified. So nobody knew where I was or when I was going to get there. They hunted down Bill Vierhile and Hope Vierhile and got Bill and said, I don't know how, they must have asked somebody who owns this house, how can we get in? And Naples being Naples, they told them how to find Bill and Hope, and they came over and let them in, and they had unloaded everything. So I got here and everything was unpacked, and they were just waiting for me to sign the check and send them on their way. I guess they went to the Naples Diner for a while, back in the day. But, so there were Hope and Bill waiting for me when I got there at 11 o'clock at night, a little worried because I'd taken so long to get there. But what I'll never forget is that when I opened the refrigerator after they said goodnight and went on their way, it was rather late, there were eggs and milk and healthy purple and pamphlets for things that I needed to know and places that I might want to go, and a map of Naples, and all of those things they had put into the apartment because they knew I didn't know anybody and wouldn't have had time to go to the grocery store. There was two paint by numbers paintings of Hopes that were on the walls. And when I moved out, I seriously considered stealing them. I regret now that I did not. But I didn't have the heart to. But they were my first friends when I came to Naples. They took very good care of me, and they made me feel extremely at home from the moment I crossed through the village gates, so to speak. And I will always remember them for everything they did for the theater and everything they did for me. So that's my memory of Bill and Hope.
I'm Dick Collins, and I'm a cousin of Bill's. And the connection is that my dad and Bill's mother were brother and sister. So that made us first cousins. And my other older brother is here with me, and we consider Bill as our older brother. We spent a lot of time with him over the years, and in particular, when Myra went off to college in 1950, right? He spent his first year at Bonaventure with Bill, living off campus. So we got to know each other pretty well. And then I have to go back, I don't know if you remember the Frank Whitmer family, and Frank Whitmer Jr. had just gotten out of the service, and he had a Ford agency up in Saranac Lake. And Bill was very good friends with the Whitmer family, so he invited us to come up for a weekend to go camping. He had a camp on Saranac Lake, and he ran a Ford agency in Saranac. So Bill, Marv, and Bill had just gotten a new 49 Ford sedan, so we drove up to Saranac Lake and made arrangements to get a campsite on Saranac Lake. Fortunately, Frank Whitmer had his Chris-Craft boat up there that he stored, so he let us use it. Well, Bill had not too many experiences driving a Chris-Craft on a stony lake. So we would go out sightseeing at Mount Van Heuvelberg. What do you call it? The at the Olympics sites up there, and the ski areas and that kind of stuff. We all visit all those. We'd come back late at night and take the boat out to our campsite. And he kept the boat in a right in the what do you call it? Livery, the boat livery, I guess you would call it. And one time we had a little trouble bringing the boat in, and Bill forgot to put the boat in reverse, and we kind of drove right into the dock. And of course that kind of shook us up a little bit. And then another time, we were out on the lake, and it's very difficult to run a boat on a lake when it's dark. Well, we caught a couple of rocks, and we found out that the boat didn't have the power it used to have. We kind of bent the propeller a little bit. Of course, I think at that time, Frank Whitman was glad to see us go home. But it was a lot of fun at the time. The other thing I want to talk about Hope. Hope was a very astute investor, as most of you were aware. Well, she used to ride a scooter, a Honda motor scooter. And Bill decided that she should not be riding it anymore, so she decided to sell it to me. So she called me up one day, wanted to know if I wanted to buy her a motor scooter. I said, well, Hope, I don't know. Let me check with Helen and see if she's going to let me do it. So she said, Helen nodded her head, okay, Dick, go ahead. And I said, well, how much do you want for it, Bill, or Hopey? Well, I'll sell it to you for $300, Dick. And I'll throw the helmet in at the same time. Well, that sounded pretty good, but I didn't know anything about it. The motor scooter was 10 years old. It was a Honda. So I said, let me get back to you tomorrow, Hope, and I'll let you know. So I did some research, checked out some of the Honda dealerships in the Rochester area. And I said, well, what's this? This is a 1980 Honda motor scooter. What's the wholesale value on it? And the guy said, oh, between $900 and $950. Oh, okay. So the next day I called Hope back. Oh, I'll take it. Okay, so I went down, picked it up, got a friend of mine to drive it back for me, and with a helmet and everything. So 2 or 3 days later, I got a call from Hopi. She said, Dick, you know, I was checking my paperwork when I bought that scooter. And, you know, I think you got a pretty good deal. I said, yeah, Hope, I wasn't born yesterday. So I paid him the $300 for it, got the helmet, and drove it for 10 years. And I sold it for $400. You don't come across a deal like that very often. But I thought that was pretty good. So not too many people went around Hope. 2 comments I have. Thank you.
Joanne and I painted Hope and Bill's house back in the early 70s. And if you know the garage in front, there's a deck up above it, redwood deck. And we were painting it, and I finished up painting the garage doors underneath that day. And the next day, I drove up and Bill says, you're going to have to paint the doors again. I said, man, I thought that was a good job. So I find out that Opie was staining the deck with red paint, and a bee was bothering her, and she swatted. The other story I had was this too is all involved painting. I parked my car as far away from the garage as possible, and it was one of those cars that look at home in a junkyard that got our own drive because we were poor teachers at that time. And Hope drove back out of the driveway, out of the garage, and backed right into my car and took off. I don't know if it damaged the car, but you couldn't tell it damaged my car because it didn't beat up to begin with.
Anybody ever have pancakes with Bill and Hope? At that place way over in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah.
Short track. He used to love to take people to that place, and you'd ask him if he wanted to go back. He took me there the first or second year that I was in town, and you'd ask to go back, and how do I get there? He said, I better take you. And he could get you there, but he couldn't tell you how to get there. So you always had to go. I don't know whether that's because he just liked to have dates for pancakes or what it was. I remember pancakes with Hope and Bill. Anybody else have something they'd like to share? Over here.
Well, I'm Guy Bennett Jr., and I'm from the Vierhile Chevrolet store up in Wayland. I have to have a little commercial. But we still running up there with my two boys. And I graduated from the University of Rochester with a mechanical engineering degree. And from that I went to work with General Electric. And I spent 2 years with GE. And then I came back home and decided to work with my dad and uncle. And after I was there for about 2 years, they decided that I should be selling on the road. And I thought, those Vierhiles must be somebody that would buy a Buick. And I went into the store on my own, and I was greeted by Bill's father, John. And John found out I was a Bennett, and he says, I'm not buying anything from you. And I wondered what the reason was. And it must be that somehow he had a run-in with my uncle. And I promptly told him, I says, you had the talk and the visit with my uncle, but I says, you're talking with me now. And I was just a kid on the street. And I always wondered what Bill thought of that, because he was there to listen to it. Time went on, and I think Hope was driving a Pontiac at the time that was sold by Claude Cornish. Hey, we got some people here that know. Well, anyway, life went on, and the next thing you know, Ford trucks were always in Bill's field, and but here's hope. And there was hope. And with that, I started to sell her Buicks. Many of which were Rivieras. Top of the line. And she ordered one, as she did many of them. And the car came in. And would you believe that car was in the bottom? And I say in the bottom, it had to go down the pitch to get down to the lower car. The trucker went to take that Riviera off and then went back up. We had to go get the tow car with a winch on it to pull it up out of there and get it in. It would run fine forward, but no reverse. And of course, if you know Hope, she was always looking for that Buick. And she was calling and calling about that. When's it going to get there? When's it going to get there? And of course, it gets there and we got a problem. Well, we went at it right away to try to get it fixed. And of course, the transmission had to come out and be torn down. And Hope was calling on the weekend, is my car there? I couldn't lie to her. Yes, it's here. So she came right up to the store. And here's her transmission laying all out in pieces. And I thought, boy, what's Hope going to do to me this time? And I thought about it a bit, and I says, we got a little problem here, Hope. And she said, what's the matter? And I took her out and back to see the car. And of course, that transmission was all laying there in pieces. And I thought, how am I gonna make the approach on this one? And I said, we got a problem here, Hope. But I says, I know you'll understand, because I can't believe that Bill could ever not have an appliance and didn't have a problem, and he had to cope with it, and he had to fix it. And that's what we're gonna do with this. I said, we'll get the car back together, it'll be just as good as if it was brand new. And somehow, I knew she had GM stock. And she went back home, and I had already told her not to say anything to General Motors or Buick, just ignore her. But of course, Hope couldn't do that. She had to write General Motors a letter. And of course, guess who got a copy of it? And you know, I looked at that letter, and she had said some things in there that really weren't quite true. And one of them was the fact that we were trying to get that parts to get that car back together. And she was saying that we were having trouble getting them. Well, we weren't having trouble getting them, we just had to have time enough to get them there. And I kind of reprimanded her for that. And we got the car fixed, and it ran absolutely fine. In fact, it ran for a couple, 3 years when she traded it back to us. But I'll never forget, I got a second letter from General Motors. And she had apologized for everything that she had said. And I thought, how many times do you ever get a customer that would do that after they said something? So I always remember I got involved with the Wayland Historical Society and getting that started. And I remember Bill, he was one of my first contacts to get down here as to how to raise money for it. And he spent a lot of time with me, and we had to raise a couple $100,000 up there. And I shall never forget the help that he gave us to get that done. Well, just a few of my thoughts about the Vierhiles, and I've loved them all the way.
Hello, I'm Mary Cornish, and I've lived in Naples for 50 years. I'm a graduate of Indiana University in Pennsylvania, and applied for jobs in this area because I had an experience coming here to visit, and accepted a job at Naples Central School after graduation, and was told that I would have an apartment ready when I got here because the person who had introduced me to Naples had been from Naples and then lived in Indiana, Pennsylvania. Well, I was kind of shocked by that. I brought my belongings and drove a car one afternoon on Sunday, and I needed to go to this particular address on Main Street. I went there, and there was Hope and Bill. I had gotten a letter from a friend telling me their names. I drove in the driveway, and Hope said, "There's our girl!" And very similar experience to Karen. I had an upstairs apartment, went in, and I said, I just wanted to know if there was laundry that went with the, with the rent and everything, being a new employee. And she said, if you can't get your clothes clean, just let me know. Well, if you knew Hope, that's another story, but I didn't have any problem. They put a brand new washer and dryer in the basement so I could get my clothes clean for teaching, because she said, you're going to have to dress up. Of course, the day I came, and that day, you wore a complete stockings, high heels, suits, whatever, right, Tom? And the teacher's dressed. So she had hangers, she put hangers in the closet. She did all of the little things that some sisters might do. And she said, no, I'm going to adopt you for a while, okay? And I said, okay. We spent many, many, many years on and off visiting and laughing. And every time I see her in a restaurant, everyone, she look at me and say, there's my girl. I love Bill and Hope. They're wonderful. They were wonderful citizens. And I will always honor the memory. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to read mine because it's better if my thoughts are put down on paper first before I ramble. Well, my name is Marilyn Botter, and I live currently in Union Springs and over on Cayuga Lake. But my husband was John Botter, who was known as Jack, and they grew up on Wells Street. And Bill and Jack, along with Bud Keith and Bob Vierhile, were hangout pals through their school years. Bill and Jack continued their friendship until the death of my husband in 2012. And after graduation from Naples Central, World War II was underway, and the men went to fight for their country. They continued their friendship after the war, but life had changed. College, followed by marriage for Bill, allowed Jack to meet Hope and to be an usher at their wedding. Bill and Hope continued to be friends, and every visit to Naples was a visit to Bill and Hope. When Jack became ill, Bill and Hope visited on a regular basis. Truer friends could not be found. Over the years after our wedding, I heard of many pranks that this inseparable group had fun preparing and carrying out. Not hurtful, but challenging. I heard about an outhouse that was lifted to the roof of the school building. I heard about a movie that they made called I Hates Love. A ski hill that was purchased so they could all enjoy skiing with someone at the bottom who could drive them back up to the top of the hill. Our home saw many appliances over the years from Bill's appliance store. The yellow delivery truck, the repair visits around town, the sign in the window that a delivery was being made and he would return at a certain time. Bill and Hope were known by all in the village for their generosity and their involvement. I miss all of them. They were an integral part of my life as well. So when I visit the cemetery, I visit them. I can continually be reminded of the good times and the laughs that we all shared.
When this special evening was planned, it was going to be back in April. And then there was a problem I understood with the water line, and so the date got changed. But this is something I was given tonight by Karen that I had sent to her in the email and dated March 28th. So I'm going to read what I thought she was going to read, but then I thought probably she had so many to read that I would do my own. And mine is sort of serious. Our times with Bill were a lot of fun, but I guess when I thought about our lives and our times with him, I don't have a lot of funny things like many of you do, but this is how he touched our lives. Bill Vierhile was a very interested and outgoing person and extremely dedicated to the community of Naples, the history of Naples, and the organizations. My first connection to Bill was when I was still a teenager, going to the Middlesex Valley Central School, as one day I got off the bus at our farm home on Bagley Road, Rushville, and headed toward the house to find out that Bill was putting a new rubber tile floor in our kitchen. In later years, Bill remembered that I was carrying my homework, but also a cornet, which I played in the band. Bill's memory was amazing, as just the past summer, he recalled this experience. My parents had a rental house in Rushville, and in later years, rented my grandmother's house around the corner. And as everyone knows, rental property often needs a new stove or a new refrigerator or a used one. Bill not only sold new appliances, but used ones at a reasonable price. And since my father was busy with farming, my mother was the one who dealt with Bill dealing with these new or used purchases. When you dealt with Vierhile's appliances, you knew that when they said they would be there, it would happen. Not like today, when they give you a window of 4 hours for delivery, and then they are sometimes late. 3 years ago, when my ice maker was frozen up, I went into Vierhile's and asked if he had any ice cube trays that I could use until I got my ice maker working. And sure enough, Bill came out with 3 trays. When my grandmother's 1938 refrigerator had the nerve to quit in 2013. And after 75 years, Bill brought up a used refrigerator, like new. And actually, I like it better than my GE new side-by-side freezer refrigerator. When John and I got involved with the Bristol Valley Theater Board, we really got to know Bill and Hope much better. Also, their good friends, Bruce and Dorothy Watson. Bruce in later years was a big help to Bill in making deliveries. It was interesting to hear the two of them discuss some of the difficult deliveries they made. As we talked with Bruce and Dorothy, I found out that I had taught chemistry to 2 of their nephews, Harvey and Bruce. As time went on, their nephew Bruce purchased the Killbuck restaurant south of Kenesteel. And so Bill, Hope, Bruce, Dorothy, John and I made the trip down to Killbuck restaurant to have a rib dinner, which was a special on Thursday nights. This was an annual trip down to see my student, Bruce, and enjoy a fantastic meal. Last year, Bill, John, and I made our annual trip, and afterwards I asked Bill if he would like to continue south, since it was early June and didn't get dark until about 9:30. And so we toured Jasper, Addison, Painted Coast, Kearney. Bill's nephew had given Bill an iPad or something similar, so he would check out the roads in the vicinity where we were, and we kept going until it got dark. It was amazing how good Bill was with that new piece of equipment, and what a kick he got out of using it. As time went on, we realized that Bill was a graduate of St. Bonaventure University in the class of 1951. And so whenever we invited the president, faculty, or staff from St. Bonaventure to join us in dinner for the prior to going to the BBT Theater, we always included Bill and Hope. And after Hope passed in June 2013, we told Bill that we wanted him to join us at the Vineyard for dinner prior to every BBT play. At the plays, I usually sell raffle tickets. I'm sure many of you would ask. And since Bill always stayed up in his certain seat, I usually went up and asked Bill to purchase some raffle tickets, which I knew I could count on. He never failed me on that. For 14 years, John and I co-chaired the BBT golf tournament, and all 14 years, Bill paid for a hole. Bill and Hope hadn't graduated from Cusson College, where I graduated, and Marilyn, who just spoke, graduated. But because of a close friend, Marilyn, they started giving the annual gift to Cusson College. This meant that Bill and Hope were always invited to hear the forum speaker in the Cusson College Chapel, with a fancy dinner held in the dining room following the speaker. Every year we felt fortunate to have Bill and Hope join us at our table for the dinner. In the fall of 2013, we took Bill with us for the dedication of the new state-of-the-art business building at St. Bonaventure. We found out that one of John's friends, Jim Cross, and his wife usually had lunch every Friday with Bill and Hope. And so a couple of times when we were in Naples on Friday, we joined them at the Redwood. This past summer, we went with Bill to one of his favorite restaurants in Atlanta. It wasn't surprising that the staff at the restaurant knew him. Plus, he knew a number of the other people eating there. And what a delicious chicken dinner we all enjoyed. We also enjoyed going with Bill to the Antique Inn near Cusson College and Bully Hill for lunch. Our last day with Bill was spent going to the opening of the Hammondsport Boat Museum. Bill really enjoyed his time there, going up and down those stairs so much that my husband John got pains in his chest, going up and down trying to find Bill. We would just like to say in closing that we felt very sad to lose such a marvelous friend.
I think I'm gonna go ahead and follow that. My name's Greta Sealer, which I forgot to tell you before. And Bruce and Dorothy Watson were very dear friends of mine and neighbors. And although I knew both Hope and Bill from the appliance store, and because you can't live in Naples without knowing Hope and Bill, I got to know them much better through Bruce and Dorothy. And these actually are from Dorothy's garden. So I had to stop today and pick those from Dorothy's garden. And I could go on and on. My favorite story, though, was we would go out to lunch on a regular basis, the four of us. And then Dorothy died, and so it was the three of us. And you know how that story is going to go. But what I used to like the most is listening and watching Hope tell her Hopi stories. And at some point, Bill would just cross his arms and lean back and grin. And that was my favorite part, because he always got such a kick out of Hopi. And as long as I'm here, my dear friend Michael Pareca is not able to be here tonight, which he was hoping to do. He is at a wedding in New York. As some of you may know, he used to be the artistic director here. So he sent me a remembrance. He says, "I wish I could be there tonight to join in the celebration of two extraordinary people. I have a wedding to attend in New York City. In fact, Bonnie Butkus, Ann Heibach, and I will all be there, and we'll be sure to toast Bill and Hope together as the former management team of BVT. I had the great pleasure of being artistic director of BVT for 5 years, and a director there for 5 years prior to that. Just like all of you, I love Bill and Hope. It's easy to imagine that Bill Vierhile's appliance store window display and the tunes that Hope Vierhile's car played when she was backing up completely defined them and defined what makes Naples the unique, colorful, and wondrous community that it is. But that's only part of the story. Bill and Hope Vierhile actually defined community service, pride, wisdom, leadership, and the essential need for community participation. If you needed something done, quickly and efficiently, you called Bill. We all know that. He knew everyone and everyone knew him. Hope portrayed the whimsical sidekick role to a T. Who could ever forget the twinkle in Bill's eye when he'd say, after one of Hope's effusive, rambling discussions, "I call her hopeless." I think many of us have heard that. But the truth is, Hope missed nothing. She had a sharp eye and a quick wit, was wildly creative, and was intuitive and brilliant. Like a Gracie Allen to his George Burns, she possessed intelligence, incisive wit, and great timing. Bill did a lot and said a lot, but Bill's leadership was equally filled with strength and wisdom in the things Bill did not say. He was a master class in diplomacy. Congress could have learned a few things from Bill. He made things happen and found the common denominator in all of us, and he certainly did that. I have two quick stories. Bill and Hope were so filled with pride about the productions at BVT that one time they drove me a few hours to another theater that was doing Forever Plaid, just to show me that our previous production of the same show was just as good, if not better. During that trip, which included a stop for dinner, every time I got in and out of the car, Hope scolded me for closing the door too hard, because she was convinced that it would somehow do damage to her car. She did not miss one opportunity and said it every time I opened and closed the car door. Bill looked at me and laughed each time. Before the BVT parking lot was paved, there was a real need to help Mary Cornish's yard, because plowing during the winter was moving a lot of the parking lot gravel into her shrubbery and property. I spoke with Bill. To this day, I have no idea how Bill and Bruce Watson made a full-size cement wall appear out of nowhere, which I just parked next to. Trucks lifted, dropped, and assembled the wall in the parking lot. It was huge. Bruce said, "Don't ask any questions." And I didn't. I am finally bringing it up 15 years later. We actually called it the seawall, but we immediately spruced it up with dozens of daylilies dug out of Joan Luther's yard. And once again, Bill saved the day and came to the assistance of yet another Naples neighbor. Life goes on and communities evolve, and that's the way it should be. But we all know the Lucky Ducky Derby, the juice wheel at the Grape Festival, the far left corner of the Redwood, every Rotary meeting, all of Main Street, and every parking lot in Naples will simply not be the same without Bill and Hope. Aren't we all the luckiest people on earth to have learned that from them? I wish you all a good night, and don't slam your car doors on the way out.
My name is Pat Annecy, and my husband Joe and I came here in 1966 to teach. And we lived in one of Bill's apartments too. And I was trying to think which one it was. And ours was the one right by the driveway. And we first lived upstairs. And then the downstairs one became free, and we moved downstairs, and Karen Doty and her family moved upstairs. So he was quite the landlord, but it was just a wonderful time that we came, and we're still here.
I'm Woody Thomas. Some of you know me and many of you don't. It was about 55 years ago that my in-laws and I bought a piece of property together down just above Route 21, cliff wall there. The only way you could get to that property was to drive across the farmer's land, and that was agreeable. And we put up tents in there, but my wife's parents decided that it really would be nice to just get a trailer down there and set it up, and, rather than sleeping in a tent. So they did that. And then they needed a refrigerator. Well, of course, where do you go for a refrigerator? So Bill got it in his truck, drove down across Ralph Lincoln's farm, not Ralph Lincoln, down into the woods, pulled up in front of the trailer, picked up the refrigerator, carried it into the trailer and hooked it up. And I thought, my goodness, that's really something. Pick up the refrigerator and carry it in. And we've enjoyed pleasant times with Bill from recent years as we've come to know him better. But that incident really sticks with me.
This one arrived with no return address and no signature, none. So it may be one of yours, and you can either fess up and come down and read it yourself, or I will read it for you. I don't have any idea where it came from. Didn't even check the postmark. Mr. Vierhile, everyone he came in contact with knows what a kind and generous spirit he had. He loved this community, and the feeling was reciprocal. The sparkle in his eyes radiated each time he was in service to another. He simply enjoyed helping. We got to know Bill and his lovely wife Hope while attending St. January's Church. They helped the parish thrive in so many ways. But on the personal side, the Vierhiles took an interest in our two homeschooled sons. On so many occasions, one or both of them would present the boys with fun little gifts and tokens that were not only interesting, but thought-provoking and out of the ordinary. A miniature windmill, garden stones for their outdoor project, book bags for their many notes and lessons, antique vehicles, and more. A simple thank you cards never seemed enough. These sincere gestures were from the heart. Their quiet care and concern for young and old was evident in all they did because that was who they were. What a team. We are eternally grateful for the connection to lives that were lived with great integrity, humility, and service. Maybe it is best said by St. John Chrysostom. They whom we love and lost are no longer where they were before. They are now wherever we are.
Hi, I'm John Bram, here with my wife Katie. And I came up here, I think, mostly because of this box, Finger Lakes grapes. And this was a box we used at Whitmer a number of years ago when this was long before you could do a wine tasting in a store. And so our marketing effort was to get the flavor of Lake Niagara to the customers. And so this was a way we could do it by sending these little boxes of grapes around the United States, wherever we had an outlet. Mary Gardner was our champion grape picker, but it's just amazing to me that Bill would have picked up one of these little boxes as a memento. So whoever put this up here was very thought-provoking for me. I know Bill probably mostly, yes, from the appliance store. And one of the little things, somebody mentioned it earlier, Bill always used to leave a sign. Sometimes it was for delivery, but the other sign that he would have on the door would be, "Gone for coffee, back in 15 minutes." And I would wait, and I'm thinking, must be he just left, because I think I've used up all the 15 minutes. So I was thought that was really cute. I mean, that's small town, that's Naples. The other thing that, and I'm not totally sure that I appreciate this now that I think about this, in Rotary, Bill was a leader. Bill was someone you looked up to, and Bill set an example. One of those examples was the fact that Bill Vierhile, at the time of his death, had, and I'm not even sure how many years, but it's well over 50 years. Perfect. How many, Bill? 67. All right. And that's the man right down there, Al, and he's got 57. But I thought that was quite an honor. So I decided that I should try to get perfect attendance. So I think I'm right after Al, and I have 40-something, or maybe it's 50. I've kind of lost track. But being a Rotarian and maintaining perfect attendance is a great thing because, I'll give you a little sideline here, because Katie says whenever we go on vacation, one of the first things we do at the hotel is check where the Rotary meeting is that week so I can attend and make up. And believe me, it's a good thing, because whatever country you're in, not that we've been at that many countries, you're very welcome, and you learn everything about local and about that country from the people that are there. Now, the downside of this is that perfect attendance is perfect attendance. So that means you have to make up every meeting of the year. And I discovered after probably 10 or 15 years of perfect attendance that, maybe this isn't such a good idea, because it's kind of a strain at times. But who wants to give up 15 years of perfect attendance? So you just continue on. So I credit Bill and like Al Mann with setting the example for us younger Rotarians at that point in time. Now, also, Bill, he was a very giving person. We have in Rotary a camp for handicapped children called Camp Onsiawa. Onsiawa stands for Ontario, Seneca, Yates, and Wayne. It takes place over at Babcock Covey. So each of the clubs is asked to either help get the camp going or tear down. And as you know, Bill had his yellow truck with that very handy ramp in the back. So he always, at least until recent years, he always offered his truck and would take people with him. And that takes a lot of dedication, because that's year after year after year. Kind of like having perfect attendance. And now I'm going to switch a little bit to hope. At these Rotary meetings, okay, we have like an annual meeting, or we'll have a festivity like a steak roast or something like that, and we bring our guests. Mostly those guests are our better halves, and you could always plan on Bill, when it got to Bill, to introduce his guest, who was Hope, of course, his comment was, and we knew what was coming, "I always have hope." I mean, it was just so unique. I felt, and I said, I'd love to introduce my wife, Katie, but just saying, "I have hope," it just, so different. Nobody else could say that. And talking about hope, Katie asked me if I would mention this because she told me about it. Katie and Hope helped the Girl Scouts for a number of years. Katie's sister Mary was kind of the leader of the group. And Katie mentioned to me that how caring Hope was to the girls in Girl Scouts. And sometimes she would find that some of the girls, they didn't quite, their families may not have had the money in order for their membership and to go on this trip or on that trip. And guess who made that possible? It was Hope. It was Hope. Also, and I'm going to jump back to Rotary now, we have a thing in Rotary called a Paul Harris Fellow. It could be, I'll call it a fellowship, because it's not singular for men, it's for women as well. And even though Hope was not a Rotarian, and to make a long story short, in order to make somebody a Paul Harris Fellow, incidentally, Paul Harris was the starter of Rotary, you actually make a $1,000 donation to Rotary International, and Rotary International does major projects all over the world, one of those being polio at this point in time. And sometimes that $1,000 came from the club, from our treasury, and sometimes that $1,000 came from people in the community. And we never, it was a very private thing, so we don't know who did that, who would give this $1,000 for somebody to be honored. And I know that Hope did more than one of those. How many, I don't really know, but that's that type of giving behind the scenes that really made Hope and Bill such fantastic people, and it was my real pleasure to honor them. And I do really thank Bill for setting the example, so I'm still making up Rotary and getting that perfect attendance. Thank you very much.
I'm Joel Luther, and I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but I can't help it. I have over the years had dozens of Bill Vierhile washing machines, so I just want to go on record and say the next one that dies, I don't know what I'm going to do. Every week when I go out there to do my laundry, I think of Bill, but the thing I remember most was about Hope. Hope, I was a young mother, moved into the Naples School District, and somebody asked me to be a Girl Scout leader, and I said, sure, because I don't know, I didn't know what to do, so yeah, that's fine. And they said, your co-leader will be Hope Vierhile. And I said, okay, that'll be fine. And they said, but you can't meet on Mondays, because that's when she counts money for the Catholic Church. And I said, okay, how about Tuesdays? And they said, okay, that'll be fine. So I met Hope, and I said, what would you like to do? And she said, I want to count the money. So every week, Hope would take the can and count all those little sweaty dimes that came in the hands of all those little brownie scouts, and whatever didn't match, she made up. And that was the true essence of Bill and Hope Vierhile. And on behalf of the Naples Library, I would like to thank the Vierhile family for all that you've done for us. Thank you.
When we moved to Naples in 1990, my husband decided that we were going to sell the old antique grape trays that he found just stored. And I'll never forget how Bill and his brother Bob both were very pleased, and they seemed so happy that we were selling these boxes to people that were coming from the cities that liked the old primitive look, I guess is what you called it, because they were just very old. And he was very, very helpful. He gave us some old historical 4 different pictures of the pickers and the fields and the one of Mr. Riesenberger, which we proceeded to frame. Jeff worked on really nice frames for, and we sold them. And Hope, I remember when we were set up at the farm and craft market, well, Dom's market, it wasn't the art market, she came and bought one of our little aqua frogs. I'll never forget how much she loved that little frog. Every time I saw her, she told me how good her little frog was doing, and it gave her lots of entertainment, and she enjoyed her little aqua frog. And most recently, I'm just really thankful for every time when I was downtown, I saw Bill, I would go to his store and say hello, and he always had a smile. And I mentioned to him how I regretted that I didn't get a good picture of the big black W, because I wasn't thinking how quickly it was going to disappear when Haslets came to town. So he proceeded immediately to go right over and got a photo of Whitmer's with the big black W on it for me, which I took home and framed and I have on my home. But I just think Bill and Hope definitely were the epitome of a good neighbor.
I just wanted to speak to the perfect attendance because, as I said, I started going out to lunch with 4 of my friends, and it ended up being 1 at the end. And after Hopi died, we went out. We continued to go out to lunch as regularly as we could, and I found out that Bill had perfect attendance at Naples Central. So when I found out he had perfect attendance at Naples Central, it was no wonder he had perfect attendance at Rotary. This I'd like to read from Leanna Landsman, who is the daughter of Doc and Katie Abraham, who is still in Florida. She hasn't come back up yet. She said, "We are so sorry to miss the tribute to Bill and Hope, 2 people who were such strong supporters of Naples and its values. Bill was a frequent, delightful presence at our kitchen table growing up. All the appliances we ever had came from Vierhile's, and when Bill and Kermit Hilton came to install or fix one, Doc would get out his quote-unquote banana split dishes, no matter the hour, and spoon up a concoction for them. Bill and Doc would talk all things Naples, no gossip. They'd talk about how to remain a great, vibrant, small town without suffering the fate of so many small towns in the area." And Bill continued that right up until the end. That's my little note. Bill instilled the civic sense in folks, young and old. Bill's motto was, "You have to love your community, because if you don't, who will?" Whether through his activities in Rotary or the Great Festival, his mentoring of young people, or his values as a business owner, Bill led by example. He taught passersby to cherish our history by drawing them into his window displays. He was a fair and honest businessman who believed that service trumped salesmanship. If you took good care of your customers, they would come back, and generations did. Hope inspired Neapolitans because she was curious about the world, and with each of her famous trips, she brought a small bit of this big earth home to us. Hope would land back in Naples, her wrist dangling with some wonderful handcrafted bracelet from far away, and recount dazzling details of the people she met, the experiences she had. She taught us that we lived in a global society well before the time it became a cliche. Bill was proud that the Naples Community Park came out of the ground on Route 245. We have asked the Park Foundation to select and plant a mighty Naples maple in their honor. We know it will thrive and give pleasure to all who enjoy the park.
I didn't think I was going to speak either, but I'm Lisa Vierhile, and Uncle Bill and Aunt Hope were a big part of the family. I just have a few quick stories. One is obviously about the cat. After Aunt Hope passed, no one could talk about a cat longer than Uncle Bill. I mean, I remember hour-long conversations on the phone with him talking about the cat and where the cat was sitting and what the cat was doing and the movies on the iPad about the cat. So we all love and miss Tyre. A couple other things is that for my high school graduation, I was the spoiled kid in the family. Aunt Hope and Uncle Bill took myself and Cliff Stone's daughter, Mary Stone, to Bermuda. And it was a fabulous trip. And since Bermuda is actually a British island, Mary and I failed our moped tests, which required driving around a moped in a parking lot. But we were very unbalanced, they said. So we had to ride with Aunt Hope and Uncle Bill. And Mary got to ride with Aunt Hope, which was a treasure. Because they're British owned, they drive on the opposite side of the road. And at one time during our journey, Aunt Hope turned around to Mary and said, "Am I on the right side of the road?" As Mary was screaming, "No, you're not." And as traffic was coming at us. But the other thing about Aunt Hope was that she loved to send packages. And I was the recipient of many of those packages. If I didn't order something and a package came in the mail, I definitely knew who it was from. And whether it was that beautiful conch shell nightlight, or that ceramic cat that had a motion sensor and meowed when I walked past it, I cherished every one. Although I have to admit, please, they were a lot of white elephant gifts that I gave later on, but I did appreciate all of them. And those who know Aunt Hope and Uncle Bill, they have martinis every night. And when they did come to visit my husband and I, who aren't martini drinkers, they would bring their own and share. And so even at the end, when Aunt Hope was in the hospital, we were still talking about bringing in martinis for her. And we did. Uncle Bill did, though she couldn't have it at that time. But I have been to every restaurant in, probably 4-county radius with Uncle Bill, with him going along those back roads, pointing out who lives in every single house. And those are just some of the times, along with the summer days in the pool that I spent with Aunt Hope, going through catalogs, she loved her catalogs, that I will always remember.
Thank you, Troy. My name is Troy Cusson. I had the opportunity to work at Bristol Theater in the early 2000s, and in doing so, cross paths with Bill and Hope often, as well as I live here in town. So I just wanted to tell the story about this. One day I saw Bill out back at the store, and he just got back from a delivery, and he seemed particularly winded this day, and I thought, "You okay, Bill?" And he said he'd just come back from delivering a refrigerator to a house on Westlake Road, except that when he got there, he found out it wasn't the house on Westlake Road, it was the people's boathouse on Westlake Road, and it was at the bottom of several flights of stairs that he, of course, delivered with his handy-dandy appliance dolly. And so that's why he seemed particularly winded. And as I stood there amazed and looking at him thinking, can I help you in any way? And he said, if I knew I was going to be doing it for this long, I would have sold microwaves.
I'm Bob Harris. I met Bill either right when he was mayor of Naples or shortly after he became mayor. But it was a long time ago. I've been in town ever since the 60s and gotten to know Bill fairly well, though like many of us, not as well as I would like to have. And when he passed, I was thinking selfishly that oh, geez, I wish I'd gotten to know him better. But I didn't. So I have a good news, bad news story for you all. First, the bad news. The bad news is that Bill and Hope are no longer with us, and we have lost the opportunity for their counsel in person. The good news is that we knew them at all, and while we all, I think, would have liked to have known them better. We all had the experience of knowing them and knowing their senses of humor and all their good deeds and all their helpful camaraderie. And I think that's special.
I just wanted to say something before we finish. I don't know if people had a chance to see, but there's a plaque on display up here that's going to be going in the Mill Museum when it's able to be open. I will read it to everybody, but it just says, "This building is dedicated to Hope and Bill Vierhile, whose love of the Naples community was exceeded only by their dedication to the preservation of its history. May this building serve as a symbol of their generosity." And then at the bottom we have kind of a takeoff on where Bill used to say, I will always have hope. We say, we'll always have hope and Bill. Just a little aside with the Naples Rotary, we always have what's called happy dollars. When you're happy or you've done a trip or something, you put in the pot, but now we call them Happy Bills. And, the last thing is, as a retired teacher, I was amazed at how good a teacher Bill was. He had taught me so much. You know, people say, gee, you know a lot of stuff about Naples history. I didn't know it at one time. Bill taught me an awful lot. And I just, I miss our talks, just going on and on about different things and interesting little things. And there's a lot of times when I'm in the mill or something, I say, I wish Bill was here so I knew what that thing was. So, but thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Al Mann. I can't believe Bill is gone. Bill and I were at Rotary every Monday night. Monday afternoon, we would sit together and Bill and I would talk about our families and he'd tell me about what's going on. I met Bill in 1961. And I'm not the oldest, but I see some of these people that have known Bill since he went to school, I guess, went with him. Anyway, we rented a house on Cross Street. Walked in, there wasn't anything in the kitchen. No stove, no refrigerator. So first thing I did, I went down and went to the Vierhile. Walked in, saw Bill and his father, and said, Bill, I said, Mr. Vierhile, to his father, I said, I'm stuck. What do I do? How do I get a refrigerator and how do I get... He said, well, Bill will be up there in about 20 minutes. And it's true. I don't know whether he had to carry it out by his hand, but we all set up. He had the stove hooked up. That was how I met Bill. We were on several committees together. I know when I was on the committee for the fire department, Bill and Hope paid for the whole front of the fire department. All the brick, you can say that's Bill and Hope. Now, we're going to have Decoration Day. How many people have seen the parade in Naples? Who's going to tell us? Who's going to go? Bill would be on the porch and say, this is Al Mann coming down the street. Or he'd say, this is Bill and so. He knew, he never had a script. He knew everybody in town. He was the greatest guy in the world. I could go on and on for the rest of the night, but all I have to say is Bill was one friend of mine. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean Shank, and I just have to say something about Bill and Hope as parishioners of St. January. We miss them terribly. When I first came to Naples, Hope always counted the collection. I made the mistake of signing a check, but I didn't put it in the envelope. And she came over to see me one time and said, you get envelopes, you're supposed to put the check in the envelope, it makes it easier for the counter. Okay. Years later, she drafted me to be one of the counters and said, see, isn't it easier? You're right, Hope. And then I have to say that after Hope died, it was so sad to see Bill sitting in his pew at church. It was so Cook and I, some of us would sit next to Bill, and he was always in charge of taking up the collection. And God bless, that we have a family in town with 8 children, the Giovines, and they would come into church sometimes and take a whole pew. And he'd say, how many kids is there? 8, Bill. Wow, 8. How would you like to send them all to college? And then I had to break the news to him that Serena was expecting number 9. He goes, oh my gosh. He died before Serena had her baby, but I understand she had her little boy, on Thursday? A couple days ago. So that's my memories of Bill and Hope, and St. January does miss them.
In Naples. I was born and raised here. My name's Mona Sage, and Bill Vierhile one day, I was talking to him, I don't even know how or where, but I was about 17, and he said, "You grew up down on the lake, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "You know when you throw a rock in the water, you know how those ripples go out? That's how life is. I think I got something for you to do." And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Well, there's a club called Interact. It's a junior Rotary club, and we want to get it started in Naples, New York. And I think you ought to start it." And I said, "Okay. What do I do?" And he said, "You're going to talk to Skip Miller." And I didn't even know Skip Miller, and I feel like maybe Doc Abraham and John Bram. All of a sudden, I said to my mom and dad, "I'm going to the Catskills." And they said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I don't know. I'm going to some big, fancy Rotary hotel." I have no idea where I went, because it was that long ago, but I went with Skip Miller and maybe John Brand. I don't know who I even went with. And I learned to be a junior Rotarian girl singing R-O-T-A-R-Y. That spells Rotary. I don't remember a lot about it, but I do remember getting involved with Camp Onseawa, because Bill again said, "Remember that stone?" And I was like, what am I going to do now, Bill? I was so weird now thinking back. And he's like, "You have to collect stuffed animals for me." And I'm like, why do I have to collect stuffed animals? He said, "Because you're going to help with the carnival." "What carnival?" "Over at Camp Onseawa. You and Wendy and Marilyn, who were from South Bristol and operated the dump." Wendy and Marilyn, do we know Wendy? Yeah. It's your turn to run the grape juice booth where the kids are going to throw rubber canning jar rings to loop over grape juice bottles, because they're all special ed and you're not going to have wine. "Okay, Bill." And when they loop the ring over the bottle, you're going to give them a stuffed animal. So you have to collect stuffed animals and run the booth with Marilyn and Wendy. And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I promptly made my parents crazy, because there was no dollar store. There was nickels. I didn't have a lot of money, so I started collecting clean stuffed animals. And we'd go to yard sales, and I'd throw quarters at people, and I'd get bags, and my mother was like, "When will enough be enough? How many stuffed animals do you need?" I said, "I don't know, Bill. I didn't get an end result." Well, I guess everybody collects stuffed animals at the time, because when I got to Camp Onseawa with other Rotarians that gave me a ride, because I didn't know where I was going, Camp Covey, I had never been there. There was a big plastic tarp on the ground, beautiful sunny day, and everybody was dumping these stuffed animals on this huge mountain of stuffed animals, because they were the most cherished prize, evidently. But I dumped my bags of stuffed animals and ran that juice rubber thing. But I guess the moral of the story is, Bill did teach me that initial throw that rock in the water and see those ripples coming out. And I feel like, if for nothing else, Bill has thrown the rock in so many areas in Naples, and we are those ripples. We are to carry on cleaning that mill and fundraising for it and keeping Rotary alive and community service. And if you have an apartment, make it nice for somebody and clean it and provide a good quality service for those people. You know, we are those ripples.